Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Tech Motoring. On today's episode, we're going to discuss climate control, how to use it, why you should use it, and why it's so important to be used in an EV. So hit that subscribe button and stay tuned, because we're coming right back at you. Alright everybody, well welcome back. So like I was saying, climate control in cars, it's been around for decades, yet a lot of people are not really aware that it's even there or how to use it properly. And climate control in a car is just like a thermostat on your house. And what do you do with your thermostat in your house? Well, you set a temperature and you set whether you want heat or air conditioning, and that's pretty much all there is to it. You let the system do the rest. And that's exactly how it is in a car. And we're not in an EV right now. We're going to do an EV in just a moment, but we're here sitting in a Corvette. Now, this is a 2007 Corvette, so it's about 15 years old. And yet this car still has climate control, and actually a pretty decent climate control. And we're going to dive into what exactly the differences are between different climate controls and how to control those different climate controls better and easily. So let's dive in and take a look at this climate control system. So I've started the car now, and please disregard any of the background noise you might hear. It does have a bit of an exhaust system on it. But we're going to be looking right here at this climate control system and see how this works. Now, the first thing we're going to show you is how to identify if you have climate control. Well, it's pretty easy. If you have an auto button on your climate control buttons here, that means you probably have climate control. Auto is usually the takeaway of whether or not you have climate control. The other thing that kind of gives it away is whether or not you have your fan control knob. If you have like a knob that you turn, if it has like low, medium, high, if it has like a physical knob that like clicks into place, that usually means you do not have climate control. If you have a knob that just turns like this, where it doesn't have any, symbols or any type of numbers around it, that usually means that you may also have climate control as well. So those are a couple of things, but typically that auto button, that's usually what gives it away if you have climate control. Now, how does climate control work? Well, it works very similar to your house thermostat. And basically what that means is you set a temperature, and then that's pretty much it. We're going to turn off the climate control so we can take a look at this real quick. So now this gauge right here, this actually shows the outside temperature, which is what this is, 56 degrees. So this actually shows the outside temperature as well, which is kind of nice. But what we're interested in is how to set climate control. So if you have climate control, the first thing you want to do is just hit the auto button. Hit that, and right away everything comes to life. Now the cool thing about this car is it actually has what they call dual zone climate control. So you can see that we have a knob here for temperature and a knob here. So your passenger is going to get their own knob to adjust their temperature. Now watch right here as I turn the knob. See, it gives them their own climate control, which is really cool. Or you can turn that off if you'd like. Now, when you adjust your temperature, that is when it's automatically going to adjust whether or not you need heat or air conditioning or neither. But typically it will run either the heat or the air, especially in an internal combustion engine vehicle. Now that is something to keep in mind, that if you do run climate control, it will typically always run your compressor, your AC compressor. Even in the wintertime, it will typically run your compressor. Now it's good to run your compressor on occasion to keep it lubricated and running so it doesn't ever seize up on you. And there's nothing wrong with running it in the wintertime. Actually, you do use the compressor in the wintertime when you run your defrosters for your windshield. So it is perfectly normal to have that. But I'm going to show you a quick trick on how to run your climate control with the air conditioning off. That works in most vehicles. So let's take a look again. Now what a lot of times people do is, it's wintertime, right? So I'm going to put this all the way up to heat, and it's going to run the heat as hot as it could possibly go. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to adjust the fan speed, because if it gets too hot, then I don't want the fan speed up that much. I'll turn this down. This is not how you use climate control. This is how you use just any other vehicle's normal, I have, two knobs and that's about it. This actually does everything for you. When you hit the auto button, it will automatically adjust everything. As you can see, it thinks I want heat, so therefore it's going to put everything towards the floor because hot air rises. Now, if I change this to a lower temperature, you can see that it then splits it. Let me try to get that back. It then splits it between the floor and, you know, the top vents. Now, if I were to go on the cold side, it's going to immediately think I want air conditioning, which means it's going to blow it towards the top vents as opposed to the bottom vents. So let's go ahead and get this adjusted back up again. So now, as we can see, it's 56 degrees outside, which means that it's trying to keep us either warmer than that if we determine that we want it to be warmer than 56 degrees. So typically you don't want 56 in the car. So let's say 70 degrees is a good temperature. So it will automatically adjust air conditioning and heat to get that temperature in the vehicle to 70 degrees. Now, once again, if you have dual zone climate control, you can actually adjust these completely separately. So let's say the passenger wants to be at 65. They can adjust theirs to 65 and it will blow out accordingly to their preference. So here we are set for 70 degrees. So it's going to assume it's going to need the heat in order to, you know, warm the cabin up from outside temperature to inside temperature. And due to that, it's going to probably just use the heat, but it may also use the compressor as well. So one of the cool tricks about climate control is if you have climate control on, let's say, but you don't want to use the extra gas of running your compressor, you can actually turn off the AC. Now, this doesn't work in every vehicle, but I have seen a lot of vehicles where you can just hit the air conditioning button, which turns off the air conditioning. It still fully controls your fan speed and your temperature. So if I wanted to adjust my temperature up, it's going to automatically adjust accordingly based off of what I asked it to. Now, of course, if I were to have this in the summertime and I say, well, I want it to be 70 degrees in here and it's 95 degrees outside, it'll never actually get down to your temperature unless the air conditioning is enabled. So in the summertime, that AC compressor will have to run to keep your temperature down to whatever temperature you need. So now keep in mind that in the winter time, the vehicle produces its heat from the motor and it will be able to spit that heat out to you pretty easily once the car warms up. Now, the cool thing about that is if you do turn off the AC compressor in the wintertime, the car's still going to be able to build heat to fill the cabin. If this is the summertime and you have the AC compressor turned off, the car's not going to be able to get down to a temperature that you asked for, because if it's 85 or 90 degrees outside, it's just too hot and it's just going to be blowing hot air on you pretty much the entire time because it needs the compressor to lower the cabin temperature. So now that we have climate control set, you'll notice right away that a lot of these buttons you don't even need anymore. You won't need the adjustment for what zone you want it in because it's going to automatically do that by using that auto button. As you can see, just automatically adjusts to what we think it needs. You won't need to ever use the fan controls anymore because, well, the fans are being adjusted automatically based on your temperature. And then, of course, if you want to adjust your AC compressor, whether or not that be on or off, you can toggle that, but you don't need to. And of course, the recirculation, now this will actually kick on and recirculate automatically based on temperature. So if it's like the summertime and you want it to get cool in the car because it's 95 degrees outside, this will automatically toggle on to keep the car at a stable temperature, and then it might turn itself off once it gets to that temperature that you've set. So now, quick question is, well, what happens if I'm cold? Well, it's pretty easy. Don't turn this up to 80 degrees. Turn it up 1, maybe 2 degrees, depending on what you think might be comfortable for you. And then, of course, if that gets too hot, you can always back it down 1 degree, and everything will adjust accordingly based on that. Your fan speed will adjust automatically to build the temperature in the cabin to what you asked for, and of course the zone will automatically adjust. So if you want it hotter, it might blow that towards the floor. If you want it cooler, it may blow it out the top vents. Okay, so now that we've addressed how climate control works in an internal combustion engine vehicle, let's go ahead and jump into an EV and see how it's done in an EV and how that's so much more beneficial to have it adjusted correctly. So let's jump into that right now and take a look. All right, well, here we are sitting inside of a 2017 Hyundai Ioniq EV. Now, it's a lot quieter, right? So we are going to take a look at the climate control system in this vehicle and talk about why it's so much more important in an EV to have your climate control set properly. So let's go ahead and take a look at that Now this climate control is very similar to any other climate control that you see. You have the auto button. Of course, you have your adjustments for, what zone you want, the bottom or the top. You have your fan adjustments, temperature adjustments, all that stuff is the same. So let's hit the auto button here and take a look at what we get. So now immediately it thinks we need the air conditioning because it's pretty warm in this car right now. We have the temperature set for 73 degrees. And this is what it's going to do to automatically keep that cabin comfortable for us. Now, a couple differences with this car is that it's not dual zone climate, so we don't have a different zone for the passenger. That is just strictly based off of the single zone that we have here. So adjusting this will automatically adjust that accordingly as well for the rest of the vehicle. But we see a couple extra buttons in here. So we see the AC button and we see a heat button, which is a little different, right? Now the AC button, obviously we know because that's in every car, but the heat button. Now what is the heat button? So before we dive in on why we have two separate buttons here, let's discuss how this actually works in an EV. Now, in a gas car, your heat is provided to you by the engine. Any excess energy that gets burnt off by the engine turns to heat, and then that heat can get transferred into the cabin for your comfort in the wintertime. Now in an EV, there really isn't that much extra residual heat that gets burnt off because electric cars are just so efficient when it comes to their drivetrain. So you end up having to create heat. You actually have to basically use the battery to provide a heat source to the vehicle. Now, in a lot of cases, a lot of EVs use what they call resistive heat. And basically what that means is basically just electricity that's immediately turned into heat by resistance. And that is pretty typical for you get one of those like desk heaters that you buy, you plug it in the wall, you turn it on, and it starts blowing heat out real quickly. That's pretty much just resistive heat, and it just creates heat that way. But that's not very efficient. So some cars nowadays, like this Ioniq for instance, actually has a heat pump, which can be 2 to 3 times more efficient than just your standard resistive heat that I was mentioning before. But either way, you need to use battery power in order to create heat for your car. So in other words, you're actually going to hurt the range of your vehicle, the distance of your vehicle, because you have to use your battery for cabin heat. Now there's a couple other ways around that, which we're going to discuss right now, and you'll get a better idea of how to drive an EV and why it's so much more important to set your temperatures correctly. So looking back now at this, so as you can see, we have the temperature set for 73. It thinks we need air conditioning right now because the car's sitting in the sun. So it's going to automatically do that. Now let's say right now it's 50, it says it's 59 degrees outside in this car. So let's say, well, it's 59 degrees outside. I don't need AC to keep the car cool. I could just use the vents. I could just use the outside air. So I don't want AC. So I could turn off the AC and it will just automatically adjust its fan settings and its climate control based off of not having on our AC, which is great. That means that saves us battery power, which means we can go further with this vehicle. Now, we also have heat. So that button right there for heat is the same exact principle. If we want to have heat in our cabin, so let's say we want it up to 78, well, it's going to put that heat on because it thinks, well, you want it really warm in here, so I'm going to turn on the heat to make it happen. Now, this is really going to drop the range of your EV by running heat. Your heat is the worst possible thing that you can do to an EV to drop its range. So you don't want to use the heat unless you absolutely 100% need to heat the cabin. So ideally, you always want to keep your temperatures down at a temperature that is, well, mild and low enough in the wintertime that you can survive basically with, that temperature being as low as it can. So let's say maybe 68 in the wintertime, and maybe in the summertime you want to do more like 73, maybe 74, depending on the outside temperature, because that becomes very, very important when it comes to the range of your EV. The less you use your air conditioning and the less you use your heat, the further your car will go. And that's why we get these options in an electric car. We could turn off the AC whenever we want, we could turn off the heat whenever we want, but we can still keep the system running. We can still set a temperature, it will automatically adjust fan speed, and if we just know better than a climate control system and say, no, it's warm enough out where I don't need the heat, or it's cold enough out where I don't need the AC, this will give you the option to turn these off if necessary. Now let's talk about one more trick that you can use to conserve some battery life in your EV if you need that extra range. Now, if it's the wintertime and you need to go a long distance, turning up your heat is the worst possible thing for you. Now, I know it's difficult to sit in a cold car, and I'm not asking you to sit in a cold car, but what I am asking you is to keep your temperature at a reasonable temperature, maybe like 67, 68 degrees. And then if you have heated seats or a heated steering wheel, it is more efficient to use those features to warm you up versus actually trying to heat the entire cabin of your vehicle. Because when you say you want 74 degrees in your car, it's assuming you want 74 degrees in the entire vehicle. So it's going to use enough electricity to warm up your entire cabin to that 74 degrees. And if it's just you, then that just seems like a waste of electricity. So turning on the heated seats, if you do have a heated steering wheel as well, that also will help with that. And keep your temperature at a comfortable but reasonable temperature where the car won't burn through its battery that quickly. Now there is one more really cool feature on this vehicle I want to point out, and this is just to conserve a little bit more energy when you need those extra miles. So this vehicle has this really cool feature called driver only. Now this is not on a lot of cars. Hyundai, for one, is one of the few companies that put this, also Kia because they're the same company. But what this does, by pushing this button, it actually only heats or cools the driver side of the car. It won't put any extra climate in the passenger side or in the back of the vehicle. So this is really good to conserve extra energy as well. So if you are commuting to work every single day and it's just you, then driver only is something you should always keep on, because that will conserve quite a bit more electricity for you. It won't be that much, but it'll be enough where, hey, an extra 4 or 5 miles on a long trip, and that'll be nice to have. All right, everybody. Well, thank you very much for watching today's episode. I hope this gives you some idea of, number one, how climate control works, but number two, how it is so important going forward in the future. And as we move forward, driving more EVs, this will give us a better idea of how to conserve more power, how to get a little extra range out of our vehicle, and understand where our heat comes from, where our air conditioning comes from, how important it is for the range of your vehicle. Well, everybody, thank you very much for watching today's episode. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up just below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We have a lot more videos coming up on EVs, so please stick around for that. Check us out on our website, techmotoring.com, on Twitter @techmotoring, facebook.com/techmotoring. I'd like to thank you again very much for watching today's episode. And remember, welcome to the future and welcome to Tech Motoring. And we will see you all on the next episode.